India is like a roti. The more bites you take, the bigger it gets. You're never going to consume it. You're going to instead just experience it and navigate it. This country, just recently celebrating 75 years of independence, becoming the most populous country on the face of the earth, the fifth largest economy, the fastest growing major economy in the world, and so much more. And it was like another world when I looked at the new roads and the metro and the buildings and the airports and everything that India was stepping into. I also found what hadn't changed about India, which is the hospitality, the warmth, the ability of India to bring so many things together. And I always say to Americans who are coming here the first time, don't try to understand India, you never will. Any more than you can understand America or the world. And last year, for the second year in a row, India became the #1 source of higher education students to America in the world. 1 out of 4 of the 1 million students who are in higher education in the United States come from this incredible country. A mirror. So you could see how beautiful the view from this stage looks. As I see your faces, and I feel your spirits, and I hope you can look around and see what an incredible gathering this is, in this incredible architectural space that the Republic of India built around the G20, surrounded by a new India that is coming up and an eternal India that has never left. I'm often asked, what's the difference, Ambassador, in all the times you've come to India? Because I first came here when I was a 14-year-old. Just like the kids you counsel, I was a 14-year-old who had no idea what I was going to do with my life. My parents had met while both working at an airline, and so had raised us with the value of traveling and seeing the world. Never vacations, but trips to understand and to see and connect with people around the world. Going to Asia and Africa, Latin America. I was 14 years old when I first came here to India. And my sister was 16. We stepped off the plane. And it was a different airport back then. Some of you will remember the old Delhi airport. It wasn't as beautiful and glamorous, but I immediately kind of felt India. And I spent 2 weeks going, not just here in Delhi, but to then Bombay, to Ajanta and Ellora, to Varanasi, to Agra, to Jaipur and Udaipur, Savic country. And really, it was the time in between when I saw and felt what the average Indian, what her or his spirit was about, and it captured my heart. And I returned here every few years of my life, at least once a decade, but 5 or 6 times before I became ambassador. But it had been 10 years since I had been here when I stepped off the plane last year to represent my country as ambassador to this country, just recently celebrating 75 years of independence, becoming the most populous country on the face of the earth, the 5th largest economy, the fastest growing major economy in the world, and so much more. And it was like another world when I looked at the new roads and the metro and the buildings and the airports and everything that India was stepping into, taking its rightful place as one of the great states and nations of the world. But immediately in those first couple of weeks, I also found what hadn't changed about India, which is the hospitality, the warmth, the ability of India to bring so many things together. And I always say to Americans who are coming here the first time, don't try to understand India, you never will. Any more than you can understand America or the world. When people come to America and say, oh, I've been to America, I'm like, no, you've been to a little piece of America. You could spend your whole life traveling either one of our countries and only see a small percentage of the people and the places. India is like a roti. The more bites you take, the bigger it gets. You're never going to consume it. You're going to instead just experience it and navigate it. In many ways, it's a good metaphor for the same way we live our lives. For the students that you talk to, they're at the beginning of their lives, but they feel like they're deeply into it. They feel at a moment when they're not sure what life is about. They're not sure why they are here. They're not sure what they're going to do. They're not sure how they feel about themselves. They're not sure who their friends are. Will they ever fall in love and find a partner? Will they have a family? And overlaid on that are the struggles of things we never expect to happen, like pandemics, tragedies in our family, economic, social, cultural discrimination or difficulties. And we expect so much of young people. We expect them to be brilliant and ready. I have a 12-year-old who's about to turn 13 years old. It was her mother's birthday yesterday, and as she and I were talking after Maya, our daughter, went to sleep, we said we always project so much of our adult selves into our children, thinking that they already know things that they are actually experiencing for the first time in their lives. We forget how to be young. You know the old expression youth is wasted on the young? How often we want to take the wisdom of being adults and rewind to our more vibrant young selves and just tell her or tell him, don't worry, or if you just know this, here's a pathway forward. Well, that's who you are. You're the bridge between our wiser selves and our younger selves. You are a window forward to let young people know that life teaches us many things, and if you're a good listener, you can hear them earlier, apply them sooner, and find more richness in your life. As ambassador here, I looked at the full scope of the two largest democracies and how we interact. I've always loved India, but I was a little bit of an outlier in America in terms of studying India. Americans, if I'm honest, know much less about India and Indians than Indians know about America and Americans. And I know we have people from many different countries here too, over 90 countries I understand. So I kind of use these two countries as a metaphor for how we interact in the world together. But I looked at how we're working together and how Indians for so many years have been coming to the United States. 1 in 4 Americans has been treated by a doctor of Indian origin, and what's more important than our health and our bodies. The old joke that you couldn't become successful in business if you're Indian in the United States is now you can't become successful in business in the United States if you're not Indian. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, political leaders, including our vice president and a candidate for president, the wife of the proposed vice president in the other party. We see Indians who are heading up, or people of Indian origin, our National Science Foundation, our highways, our Surgeon General. I was talking backstage how all of these love to visit their relatives in India, so I get a lot of VIP visitors of Indian origin from the United States, but they've built this bridge between the Indo-Pacific, both sides of it, that is so strong. But I wanted to try to simplify so we could understand in the mission, what are the things we are trying to accomplish in the US-India relationship? We know that Americans and Indians feel similarly. Our hearts, I think, are very aligned. We're hospitable, warm, sometimes very emotional people. Our heads are aligned as we look at the world, understanding that an open, free Indo-Pacific is better than something that doesn't have freedom, doesn't have democracy, doesn't celebrate people's rights. So our heads think alike, our hearts feel alike, but now how can we get our feet to move alike? And I described the whole host of what we're doing, literally from the seabed to space, from everything from our oceanic health and well-being up to the stars, where right now an Indian American is at the space station. We're going to take an Indian astronaut up later this year, launch a satellite that will help us assess climate change that was built by ISRO, the great space agency that landed on the south pole of the moon, 4th country now to land on the moon for India, and NASA, perhaps the greatest space agency that humanity has ever seen together. And I came up with an easy way to understand, the 4 Ps, I call them. Peace, which Shanti, which ultimately is what we all seek and want. The work that we do with our defense engagement, the work that we do on the rights of people, the things that keep peace and maintain peace. That was the first piece. Second was prosperity, the economic work that we do. Trading, now we're our largest trading partner. The technology that we share to enhance our well-being. That was the second piece. So peace and prosperity. The third was something that we're very much living through and have just gone through, which are the things that ignore borders. And that third P is our planet. Whether it's a health pandemic like we just recently saw, or climate change that we're struggling through. 800 million people here in India alone who are threatened by climate change. I said the work that we're doing to protect our planet was the third P. But the fourth P was probably the most important of all. It's people. Because we establish and maintain peace, we promote prosperity and material well-being. We protect our planet and our health so that people can find meaning, can find what it is that they are here to do, just like the students that you counsel every single day. And on the way here, I was thinking about the students that you talked about and the idea of what the P's are for them, for human beings. I thought there might be 4 other P's. Purpose, the why. Why are we here? Why am I as a student in this school, in this lifetime? Why was I created? What am I here to do? But second is passion. What really moves me? I may be here for a purpose. I may be good at something, but that's different than what I like doing. The Greek talked about the difference between techne and arete. Techne was what you were technically good at. Arete was more your purpose of what you should do, whether you're good at it or not. So purpose and passion. But the third thing is principles. It's the kind of the how. If purpose is the why, and if passion is the what, principles are the how. And of course the 4th P is the same, people, the who. And as I thought about what you do and what we can do together, the United States and India, counselors around the world, US and India together account for more than 1 out of every 5 human beings, more than 1 out of every $4 in the world economy, over 40% of the world's PhDs, just in 2 countries. We also have some problems. Almost 1 out of 3 tons of carbon that's emitted in the world come from our countries. We have challenges we face together. But this force to come together and not just add India plus the US, but to multiply that relationship, to say when we're together, it's not in a relationship of addition, it's a relationship of multiplication, that it's India times the US. It really puts in perspective why our educational programs are so important. When we invest in young people who are able to cross the Indo-Pacific, and last year, for the 2nd year in a row, India became the #1 source of higher education students to America in the world. 1 out of 4 of the 1 million students who are in higher education in the United States come from this incredible country. The other way isn't high enough, and it's one of my goals to bring more American students here. And I ask for your input, your help, your assistance. We had more American students study in the beautiful but small country of Costa Rica last year. Really nice beaches there, so I understand why. Then came here to India, a civilizational destination. But when I came here, as a 14-year-old, and returned as a college student when I was 19 years old, studying Hindi and Urdu, reading the great religious and philosophical and historic texts of India, changed my life and my perspective. And if we're going to build a human bridge, we have to understand our histories. We have to know each other. We have to learn things like mindfulness that come from India and help a child who's struggling. I remember a school in Los Angeles where I served for nearly a decade as mayor of the city, where I went to a school that was practicing meditation. It was Indian-based meditation, mindfulness, for 15-year-olds. And I've been a practitioner of yoga for more than 20 years, and my teacher back home always said, yoga, the physical part, was only really implemented to get to the philosophical part, because most of the students were 15-year-old boys, and if any of you know 15-year-old boys, and we all do know, they need to do something physically before they can calm their minds down. And so at this school, which was one of our most lowest income neighborhoods in Los Angeles, there were very few people that ever had parents who went to the university. Many of them first-generation citizens of the United States, children of immigrants. The mindfulness and the meditation that they had helped them be able to calm down everything else going on in their lives so that they could study, they could think, they could reflect, and they could find that other peace in their life. The work that we do, whether it's through decades long, having the Gandhi Fulbright scholarships that allow folks to come here and research items of common human interest, from science and the social sciences, to medicine and history, to look at the world through each other's eyes. In fact, tonight I'll be welcoming the newest group of Americans coming to spend their year here in India. I know, speaking to people who are Fulbrights here and who have been on that bridge to the United States, that our country and that experience never left them, which is why our countries invest in that program. When we look at the help that we give to many of your students that you counsel here in India, to be able to let them know what the pathway to study in America looks like. And we just had over 10,000 people come to sessions in half a dozen cities around India over this last couple of weeks. Our Education USA program is there year-round to help them understand the difference between a big state school and a small liberal arts school, to access financial aid, to know how to apply, to make sure that parents feel reassured, to know about things like campus safety and mental health. U.S. universities and institutions of higher learning are such extraordinary places for any human being from any country, but especially here for Indians to come to see their lives change. But it's not a one-way ticket. Our institutions are strengthened by their presence as well. Americans who have never met somebody from India get to interact with somebody, hear her perspective, maybe collaborate in the future on research that will change the world, as we're doing in so many of our health and science and climate interactions. I recently visited a company here in India that took a breakthrough of an American scientist on dengue fever to have a vaccine that was effective in all 4 strains, never yet invented in human history, and gave that breakthrough to a number of Indian companies, one of whom is now in the 3rd round of clinical trials, so that maybe in a year or 2, India for the first time, and the world for the first time, because of the U.S. and India working together, will have a dengue fever vaccine that will save countless lives that we will never be able to count, because they will still be alive here. So the power of this collaboration that we have together, I think, is unprecedented. And it really starts with a quiet conversation between a counselor and a student. How many of you start those conversations with, what's going on? Tell me about what's going on in your life. Because when we listen to young people, I always find that we ourselves are transformed too. I think many people think that counselors only counsel to students, when we all know one of the gifts of being a counselor is learning from them. Whenever I give graduation speeches, I always tell students 4 things. I say, 1, be fearless. I don't care if you're a girl and the boys tell you you can't. I don't care if you're poor and somebody rich says you shouldn't. Be fearless about the world ahead of you. Do anything you can accomplish, anything in the world. Second, I say, but now that you're fearless, be humble, because the world doesn't revolve around you. Nothing is ever done by yourself. It's only done in concert. Stars are wonderful, but they have no meaning until we find constellation, connecting the pieces together to find the shapes and the meaning in the heavens above us. And you too are not a star, you're part of a constellation. Third, though, I always say this, and this is the point I want to underscore, is that I know we're often taught as leaders or as counselors or as others, learn how to speak well, and it's a critical skill for any young person. But the most important thing in life is not learning how to speak, it's learning how to listen. A great counselor is a great listener. A great political leader is a great listener. A great parent is a great listener. When I was a teacher, and my last honest job before I got into government service was as a university professor, I would love that first day of class when I'd ask my first question in a new class I'd never taught before, and I was praying somebody would raise their hand. And the front row, thank you to our front row, of the eager students would always raise their hand and start talking. Otherwise, we would have no class. But 3 or 4 classes in, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in, I would ask a question, and somebody in the back would raise usually her hand, And everybody would spin around forgetting that she was even there. Somebody who had never spoken, somebody who we thought wasn't listening. And she would say something with such insight and such profound thoughtfulness that it would change the entire course of the discussion and even the thinking of the teacher himself. Because what she was doing was not speaking, but listening and thinking and reflecting, something that in an era of social media and inboxes that are overflowing, we don't really do as well as we once did as human beings. We don't have the quiet spaces anymore. We don't have the long silences. We don't just get to hear the world that is around us. But when we do stop for a moment, when we do listen, we can better hear the needs of a student. We can better understand the hopes of a country. We can best know the work of a world. And so I want to leave you with a message of inspiration. My team gave me a lot of very specific things that I was supposed to talk about with the US-India education relationship. I hope I slipped some of those in. That we really are here to help. That we want to strengthen every single plank on that bridge between India and the US, and for those of you from other countries to the US. Because the United States at our best, and we're not always at our best, we're self-critical, we've got plenty of problems, we try not to be arrogant and lead with humility. But at our best, we are a reflection of you, of the world. You can come from anywhere on the face of the earth. Come to my hometown of Los Angeles, and you're going to find your people, your food, your religion, your language, your familiarity. It's a place that at once is the face of the world. And the luck of me growing up there is when I left Los Angeles, I felt at home anywhere in the world because I grew up alongside that sort of staggering diversity, and a good education does that. We are here to help you on the technical side for your students, not only through Education USA and the opportunities of things like the Nehru Fulbright. We have Gandhi King Foundation. That's a whole other battle to fight another day. But the challenge is to help your young people find that passion and that purpose. For those people to understand how they can navigate the principles that unite us. That's message one. But message two, the fourth thing I used to always tell students at graduations was, it's good if you're fearless. It's even better if you're fearless and humble. The most important skill you can learn is to listen. But all those three things mean nothing without this fourth one, which is that you have to lead with love. You all know what I'm talking about. There are tough days when you aren't in a good place yourself, or the student that you're counseling, or the challenge that you have, or the administration that you have to work through, or the bureaucracy that you're in, just beats you down. And you wonder, is this a day where will I be able to get through it, let alone advance any of my goals? We say, all of us, that we love each other as human beings. The Russian writer Dostoevsky once said, and I paraphrase here, I love humanity, except the more that I interact with it. And you know what that's like. It's easy to say we're for humanity. It's difficult to embrace your neighbor, the colleague who might slightly annoy you, the child who is particularly challenging, the neighbor who is different from you or makes too much noise. It's at those moments when leading with love is tested for all of us. But I truly believe that this movement that you are a part of here, that I see reflected back at me right now, is part of changing that idea that even in a complex world, in a world right now that's at war in too many places, that the idea of the IC3 movement, that we could figure out a way when we are still young to empower those guides who are counselors and empower through them the young people who will be tomorrow's leaders, and in fact are already today's leaders, let's be clear. That if they can find and access that love together with that humility and that fearlessness, to be those good listeners, that anything is possible. I know that education is the way that we will continue the progress we have seen in the US-India relationship and the progress that these two great nations together are giving to the world. sharing with the rest of the world. There's a poem about the Italian painter Andrea del Sarto by Robert Browning. And there's a line in it that really defines how I think about the work that we do. Because I want you to stretch a little further than you think. And in it, the couplet says, a man's reach should always exceed his grasp. And since we live in 2024, let's be clear, a man or woman's reach should always exceed his or her grasp. In other words, we reach for things that we don't think we'll be able to hold. That is human history. Here in India, it is an independence fighter who fought and died for independence, never having tasted it, so that India one day could be free. It's the woman who fought for the right for women to vote, but never got to cast a single ballot. And as India has its election, and had its election, as we are about to have our election, her great-granddaughter is voting because of what she reached for. It's the slave who fought for his freedom but never tasted it. It is people who fought for the right to love and marry people, no matter who they are. These are the stories of human progress. So let us reach beyond our grasp, whether it's the number of American students that come to India or the number of Indian students we can bring to the U.S. Let us reach beyond our grasp, whether it's a student of opportunity who comes from a poor village who would never even think of going to university, let alone being able to go overseas, that we can access and empower. Let us reach beyond our grasp. Let us find those students who would never become the doctors and the prime ministers and the lawyers and judges, the programmers and the CEOs who will change the world because a counselor said, of course you can, and let me navigate that pathway. And the second line of that poem says, after all, what is a heaven for? After all, what is a heaven for? Today I see a crowd that is reaching beyond its grasp, that understands that is the why that we are here. And thank you for helping so many young people understand how to get to that place. Thank you so much.